What up, Space Fam? Golson here for AnimeUproar, and today we're going to be talking about some of the best revenge moments in anime again. I said that if we got 3,000 likes on the best revenge moments in anime part 2, that I'd make a part 3. And we got well over 3,000 likes, so here I am with part 3 as promised. This time, I thought that we'd make it a bit harder. If we can hit 4,000 likes on this video, then I will get started on part 4 ASAP. Make sure to leave some of your favorite revenge moments in anime in the comments, and they may appear in the next installment. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because if you don't, you won't get notified when the next installment drops. Keep in mind, there will be spoilers in this video, if that actually bothers you. Now without further ado, let's jump into it. Since the new season of 7 Deadly Sins is currently airing, let's start with Meliodas' savage revenge moment against Fraudrin. To fully appreciate this moment, we have to go back some 16 years. Fraudrin escaped his seal and killed Meliodas' love Liz, who was the most important person in his life at the time. If we know anything about Meliodas, it's that he cares a lot about his Elizabeths. He even understands when Bond tries to kill him in the hopes that it will bring Elaine back. Meliodas completely understands how Bond could be willing to kill his best friend if it means that he could save the love of his life. So it's not surprising that when he sees Fraudrin murder Liz, his lover, he loses it. At the time, his wrath took over and he wiped the city of Danafor off the face of the earth. Yet Fraudrin managed to survive. Now fast forward to when Meliodas and Fraudrin meet again 16 years later. Fraudrin, who was in Dreyfus' body, has revealed his true form. He is absolutely huge. In the manga, Dreyfus appears to be the size of Fraudrin's foot. That's how much this monster towers over everyone. Just as Fraudrin says he's going to crush everyone in one go, he gets hit in the face. Then he keeps getting hit over and over while everyone is trying to figure out what's going on. Well, soon enough, we see Meliodas' extremely small frame. Meliodas, who was even smaller than Dreyfus, was the one who was hitting the giant Fraudrin around. Fraudrin looks completely powerless against him despite his size. It's like if something the size of an ant was kicking your butt. Fraudrin says that Meliodas' strength is no match for his now. He says, "Let's finish what we started 16 years ago," reminding Meliodas of Liz's death. At this point, to Hauser, it seems like the two are about equally matched in power. The Meliodas that is fighting Fraudrin has a combat class of 30,000, while Fraudrin has a combat class of 31,000, so they are pretty close. However, as Merlin notices, this wasn't Meliodas at his full power. Actually, this was just one of his doppelgangers, and Meliodas tells Fraudrin that he held his own pretty well against his clone. At this point, Fraudrin is shocked and extremely worried. Meliodas' actual resting power level right now is 60,000, and it's even greater in his demon form. Meliodas purposely misled Fraudrin to make his revenge all the sweeter, as he tells Fraudrin, who's sweating buckets at this point, "Seeing your face go from hope to despair makes me feel on top of the world," end quote. So he didn't have to toy with Fraudrin in the beginning, but he wanted to break him mentally and not just physically. He got his hopes up only so that he could crush them. Then Meliodas smiles his wicked demon smile, dark aura is radiating off of him, and his demon mark is showing on his forehead. He went from innocent looking to evil looking real quick. Meliodas tells Fraudrin that he'll wipe out every last trace of him from the earth. Meliodas puts countless holes into Fraudrin in a moment. It's so bad that the giant Fraudrin calls Meliodas a monster. He begins to shrink. He tells Meliodas that the Demon Clan impatiently waited for revenge against the Goddess Clan and against Meliodas for abandoning the 10 Commandments. Meliodas says he's the same way. He also impatiently waited to get revenge against Fraudrin because of what he did to Liz. He slaps Fraudrin and sends him flying, and Meliodas tells Fraudrin not to go dying on him yet. Even Bond, who was smiling a moment ago, is now concerned. He notices this isn't Meliodas' usual way of fighting. Meliodas even goes after Fraudrin's pride. When Fraudrin claims that he is one of the Demon Lord's chosen commandments, Meliodas tells him that he wasn't given a commandment by the Demon Lord. He's nothing more than a stand-in. Fraudrin loses it and starts to self-destruct. Meliodas continues to smile, and despite wanting to, Fraudrin can't wipe Meliodas' smirk off his face. He says he'll wipe Leonis from the map and all the people there will perish. But Meliodas does not give him the desired reaction at all. He just says, "If you're going to die, make it quick. You're putting me to sleep here," end quote. Fraudrin is about to take Dreyfus with him, but Griomore hugs Fraudrin. He creates an energy field around him and begs Fraudrin with tears in his eyes not to kill anyone. Fraudrin, despite being a demon, has developed feelings for Griamore as if he was his own son. He can't stand to hurt him, so he stops the detonation. He tells the boy to let down the energy wall and go to his dad with a compassionate look on his face. Then he tells Meliodas to kill him. You might think that Meliodas would have been touched by Fraudrin's selfless compassion for Griamore, but he's not at all. With a big satisfied smile on his face, he wipes away Fraudrin's body with one ruthless punch without any hesitation. Afterwards, even Merlin, arguably one of the most amoral characters in the series, can't help but think that that was an ugly way to take out Fraudrin, despite everything he's done. This revenge moment had years and even millennia behind it. It had the most powerful motivation behind it for Meliodas because Fraudrin killed the woman he loved. It made Meliodas, our happy-go-lucky shonen protagonist, look more evil and cruel than the enemy for a second. It was so ruthless that even Merlin and Bon, who hates most demons for what they did to Elaine, thought Meliodas went too far. For all these reasons, this moment stands out as one of the most powerful revenge moments in all of anime. Next, let's mix it up and look at a less savage, yet still awesome revenge moment. This Demon Slayer moment that I'm about to mention more so reminds me of when Luffy punched the Celestial Dragon than a premeditated and long-awaited revenge. This moment happens right after Tanjiro is brought in front of the pillars, the strongest and most respected members of the Demon Slayer Corps. Tanjiro is tied up and he's on trial for helping a demon, his sister Nezuko, rather than killing her. That's when the seemingly biggest jerk pillar of all time shows up, the Wind Pillar, Shinazugawa Sanemi. After all Tanjiro's been through with his sister, Sanemi comes in holding the box Nezuko is in and calling our protagonist an idiot. As if this wasn't bad enough, Sanemi tells him that it's impossible to work with a demon. This whole time, Tanjiro has been working towards healing his sister. That was why he became a Demon Slayer. And here, this higher ranking member is calling his goals idiotic and saying that they're impossible. Not only that, in addition to calling Tanjiro a moron, he stabs Nezuko through the box. That's right, he stabs the cutest girl in all of anime. At this point, we are all rooting for Tanjiro, and especially for the beyond cute Nezuko. Everyone on the internet wants to protect her, and yet this guy is hurting her. The mangaka has made it all but impossible not to hate this pillar at this point. That's when Tanjiro rushes at Sanemi. Screw the fact that he's tied up, screw the fact that he's on trial, screw the fact that he's surrounded by pillars, and screw the rules. As he runs at Sanemi, he says, "I will never forgive anybody, pillar or whatever, who hurts my little sister." Sanemi is amused, he's confident in his abilities, he's much stronger than Tanjiro after all. He goes to slash Tanjiro, but Tanjiro jumps over it and lands a glorious headbutt of revenge on Sanemi. Blood shoots from the confident Sanemi's face and he falls to the ground. Does Tanjiro apologize after realizing what he's done? Not at all. He actually lectures the higher ranking and stronger pillar. He tells him that if he can't tell the good demons from the bad ones, then he should quit being a pillar. The previously amused pillar is now extremely upset. Sanemi says he'll rip Tanjiro to shreds, but the leader of the Demon Slayers shows up before he gets the chance. This is not a conventional revenge moment, but it is deeply satisfying nonetheless. The fact is that Tanjiro, like Luffy, doesn't conform to societal pressures. He knows what's right and what's wrong, and he will break any rule in order to do the right thing. In this case, the right thing was headbutting Sanemi and embarrassing him in front of the other pillars despite his higher ranking status. Is Tanjiro concerned about the fact that he's already on trial and should therefore be on his best behavior? Not at all. He doesn't care about what others will think, but he does care about protecting his sister and his dreams. This moment does a great job of giving us a better sense of what kind of character Tanjiro is, and it doesn't hurt that the pillar jerk paid for hurting our precious Nezuko either. Lastly, we are going to be looking at the epic Jotaro from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. This is one of my favorite revenge moments of all time, and that speaks to the talent of the mangaka, because he builds up the thirst for revenge so quickly compared to some other works. While some works have revenge moments that build up over the whole series, the revenge moment between Jotaro and Steely Dan was only given about 2 anime episodes to build up. However, it's done in such a way that the revenge moment is as satisfying as if Jotaro had suffered decades of wrongdoing from Steely Dan. So the idea is that Steely Dan has a stand, a special power, which lets him tie his own pain to that of another individual. Except the pain is amplified. You punch him in the face and the person who is tied to him will experience an even more painful punch to the face sensation. Steely Dan uses his stand on Joseph Joestar, Jotaro's grandpa. Thus, if Jotaro is to hurt Steely Dan, or if Dan is to hurt himself, Joseph would experience that much more pain. He could even die from it. So that is what's going on. Steely Dan has taken Jotaro's grandpa hostage, and he is using that to hurt and demean Jotaro in any way he can think of. This is all the more impactful because Jotaro is such a cool guy. He always seems to be the coolest person in the room. He has that James Bond image going on. So imagine James Bond being asked to lick someone's shoe, and you get a sense of what's happening here. Now let's jump into the details. From the beginning, this encounter is hilarious. Steely Dan tries to act so cool. When Jotaro threatens to punch him, he just says, "Please, you cannot touch me." And then the next scene is Jotaro's stand punching the crap out of him. You see, Steely Dan was expecting that Jotaro would let him finish and explain that he is connected to his grandfather, but it's just so funny that Jotaro suddenly interrupted him with an attack after he was so cocky about being untouchable. That was truly one of the funniest moments to me. So here are some of the things Steely Dan did. He obviously connected to Joseph's body and hurt him many times. His stand also eventually devours a person's brain, so he was close to killing Joseph. He actually made Jotaro sweat in the beginning, which is rare since he is usually calm, cool, and collected. Dan hits a kid after he helped him. He taunts Jotaro, begging him to hit him in his face or open a hole in his chest. Jotaro needs to be calmed down multiple times by his friends in the beginning. Steely Dan punches Jotaro in the stomach, knowing he can't do anything back. He hits him with a rock too. Jotaro puts up with this and simply tells Dan that he will pay. Dan is completely confident though at this point. He continues to mess with Jotaro. He uses Jotaro as a human bridge to cross a ditch. He makes him scratch his back. He makes him wipe his shoes only to kick him in the face. Despite all this, Jotaro somehow gets calmer and calmer as the story goes on. He is seen at one point writing in a notebook. When asked about it, he explains that he is writing down everything Steely Dan will get payback for. He is writing it down because he is forgetful, he explains with a smile. This part is absolutely amazing because Steely Dan is supposed to be in complete control of the situation. He has all the power, and yet Jotaro is acting calm, cool, and collected even as he's getting hit, and Dan looks worried. Steely Dan goes on to make Jotaro break the law. He makes him steal a bracelet only to rat on him to the owners afterwards. Then Jotaro gets beaten up by 3 grown men as Dan steals jewels to his heart's content. You'd think that Jotaro would be upset. He just got framed for stealing, beaten up, and told to leave the country. Even with blood pouring down his face, he smiles though. He starts to laugh even. Dan asks what he's laughing about, and Jotaro explains that he's anticipating the payback. When the team finally kicks Steely Dan's stand out of Joseph's brain, Jotaro starts messing with Dan. Dan starts to run away, but Jotaro catches him and asks why he is in such a hurry. Dan quickly flips and starts to admit defeat to Jotaro. He reveals his calmness, confidence, and pride was an act that was completely tied to favorable circumstances. He licks Jotaro's shoe and begs for his own life in the most pathetic way possible. However, he still plans on trying to trick Jotaro. He plans to use his stand on him. He's just acting like he accepts defeat to buy time. It is clear that he is a man who possesses no honor at all. Jotaro catches Steely Dan's stand with his own stand and starts to crush it. He breaks Dan's arm and leg in the process. Jotaro says that the arm and the leg were payment for all the things he did to him. He starts to walk away, giving Dan hope for a 3rd time. Dan, not knowing when to quit, tries to take over a nearby girl, thinking that Jotaro won't risk hurting the girl. He approaches Jotaro to stab him, but Jotaro is dead calm. He just says, "Go ahead and do it." Then he grabs Dan's hand and uses it to cut Dan's face. He reveals that his friend Kakyoin has trapped Steely Dan's stand. He never had any intention of letting Dan go so easy. Dan offers Jotaro all the money Dio gave him, but Jotaro calls him the worst man in the history of mankind and explains that the debt he owes can't be bought with money. In the manga, Jotaro goes on to punch Dan with his stand for almost 4 full pages straight. If you read manga, you know that this is a lot of space in a chapter. Usually when there's one full page dedicated to something, it's a huge deal, but this is virtually unprecedented. It's also awesome in the anime, but the length it gets in the manga is extremely satisfying. As if that wasn't epic enough, Jotaro then signs his name and rips out a page from his notebook, saying, "And here's your receipt." He throws it on the ground and walks away like a boss. This is one of my favorite moments in anime. After initially being upset and losing his cool, Jotaro quickly accepts the reality of the situation and remains calm and even amused as Dan continues to hurt and demean him. No matter how much Dan tries to tarnish Jotaro's cool guy image, he can't do it because Jotaro won't give him the reaction Dan is looking for. Dan gets more upset than Jotaro, even though Jotaro is the one taking all the damage. Unlike Dan, Jotaro never breaks down or starts begging. The revenge moment is even better because Jotaro calmly told Dan that he would get payback early on in the encounter, despite how unlikely it seemed at the time, and things went exactly how he said they would. Perhaps after this you can better understand why Jotaro is my favorite JoJo and why this is one of my favorite revenge moments in anime. And that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, remember to drop a like. If we can get 4,000 likes, I'll get started on the next one ASAP. Make sure to leave some of your favorite revenge moments in anime in the comments, and they may appear in the next installment. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because if you don't, you won't get notified when the next installment drops. For more anime content and updates, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at AnimeUproar. A big thank you goes out to our patrons over on Patreon who help make videos like this one possible. I especially want to thank our Pro Hero tier patrons, the one and only Gilgamesh, Nothing But a Fan, Jason Wilson, King Zeldris, Angel Cruz, Steelers, Poet Pablo, Atropos Wraith, $50 Beat, Ekarat GN, Anatoly Kazatsky, DJ Nathaniel, and Alpha Dio. And are the 1-tier patrons, the ones who stand atop all clans: Steven Ingrata, Alola Natem, Mattymac239, Makoto-kun, and ya boy Seth. If you enjoy our work, you can support more of it by going over to patreon.com/AnimeUproar and becoming a patron today for as little as $1. If you do so, you'll get your name featured in future videos alongside these amazing people right here, and you'll even get access to our private patron-only Discord. So check out patreon.com/AnimeUproar, link in the description if you're interested. You can also now join the YouTube channel and support more content that way if you prefer. No matter what way you choose to support us, you'll get the same great benefits. Anyways, thanks again for everything, and until next time, see you, Space Cowboys.